My name is Max, and this is the story of how one forgotten item changed my life forever. I worked as an auto mechanic in Fort Lauderdale, while my wife Dorothy ran a small beauty salon. Nothing special, just an ordinary American suburban family. Married for 5 years, planning for kids, paying off our mortgage like everyone else. My best friend Jason worked as a manager at a car dealership and often stopped by our place. We'd watch football together, he'd help me with car repairs, and Dorothy would cook dinner for all of us. It was the perfect friendship, or so I thought. Dorothy was everything I thought I wanted in a wife. She was beautiful, with golden blonde hair that caught the sunlight just right, and these amazing green eyes that seemed to sparkle when she laughed. She was intelligent, running her salon with impressive business acumen, and she had this way of making everyone around her feel special. When we first met at a mutual friend's barbecue 6 years ago, I knew immediately she was the one. Our courtship was like something out of a romantic movie. I'd pick her up after work, bringing flowers from the gas station, not expensive ones, but she'd always smile like they were the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. We'd go to little diners and talk for hours about our dreams, our futures, our fears. She wanted a family, a house with a white picket fence, maybe a dog. I wanted stability, someone to come home to, someone who'd be proud of the work I did with my hands. Jason had been my friend since high school. He was the kind of guy everyone liked, tall, charismatic, always knew the right thing to say in any situation. While I was more of the quiet, steady type, Jason was the life of every party. In school he was the one who got dates easily while I struggled with confidence around girls. But he was also loyal, or at least I thought he was. When I finally worked up the courage to ask Dorothy out, Jason was my biggest cheerleader. "Dude, she's perfect for you," he'd said. "You two are meant to be together." When Dorothy and I got engaged, Jason threw us an amazing engagement party. When we got married he was my best man, giving a speech that had everyone in tears. He talked about friendship, loyalty, and how happy he was that his best friend had found his soulmate. The first few years of marriage were wonderful. Dorothy's salon grew from a small 2-chair operation to a thriving business with 6 stylists. I got promoted to head mechanic at the shop, earning enough that we could finally afford the house in Coral Springs we'd been dreaming about. Jason would come over every few weeks and the three of us would grill out, play cards, watch movies. Dorothy and Jason got along great, which made me happy. There's nothing worse than when your spouse and best friend don't like each other. But if I'm being honest, there were small signs I chose to ignore. Sometimes I'd come home from work and find Jason and Dorothy deep in conversation that would suddenly stop when I walked in. "Oh, we were just talking about the new restaurant downtown," Dorothy would say with a bright smile. Or Jason would quickly change the subject to something about sports or work. Dorothy started working later hours at the salon, often not getting home until 8 or 9 at night. "We're so busy," she'd explain. "I need to be there to handle the evening appointments." When I'd suggest dropping by to say hi, she'd always have a reason why that wasn't a good idea. "We're renovating," or "I'm doing inventory," or "the girls are having a staff meeting." Jason seemed to know a lot about Dorothy's work schedule. He'd mention offhandedly that she was working late again, or that she was stressed about some issue at the salon. When I'd ask how he knew, he'd say, "Oh, she mentioned it when I saw her at the grocery store," or "she texted me asking if I knew a good accountant." A year ago, I finally managed to buy an old sailboat with my savings. It wasn't much to look at, a 32-foot sloop that had seen better days, but she was seaworthy and she was mine. I spent every weekend that winter restoring her, sanding down the hull, replacing the rigging, refinishing the deck. Dorothy wasn't interested in sailing, but she seemed supportive. "I'm glad you have a hobby," she'd say. "You work so hard, you deserve something just for you." Jason would sometimes come help with the boat work. He was handy with tools, and we'd spend Saturday afternoons working on her together, drinking beer and talking about guy stuff. The boat became a symbol of freedom for me, a chance to get away from the stress of work and just be alone with the sea. This past spring I decided to fulfill a long-time dream, a month-long sailing trip up the coast to North Carolina and back. It would be my first real solo voyage, a chance to test my sailing skills and find some peace on the water. When I told Dorothy about my plans, her reaction surprised me. Instead of the resistance I expected, she seemed almost relieved. "That sounds wonderful, honey. You need to get away from work for a while," she said with what I now realize was barely concealed eagerness in her voice. Jason was equally supportive, maybe too much so. "Fantastic idea, Max. You deserve this. Don't worry about anything here, I'll keep an eye on Dorothy while you're gone." The way he said it, looking at her just a little too long, should have set off alarm bells. But I was too excited about my trip to notice. May 15th was departure day. I loaded the boat with supplies for a month at sea: canned food, fresh water, books, fishing gear, and my satellite phone for emergencies and daily check-ins with Dorothy. The weather forecast was perfect, with steady winds and calm seas predicted for the first week. Dorothy and Jason both came to see me off at the marina. Dorothy kissed me goodbye, a quick peck that felt perfunctory rather than passionate. Jason shook my hand firmly and clapped me on the back. "Have an amazing trip, buddy. We'll miss you." As I sailed out of the harbor, I looked back to see them standing on the dock, waving. Dorothy had her arm around Jason's waist, which I thought was odd, but I assumed she was just emotional about my leaving. The first week of sailing was everything I'd hoped for. The weather was perfect, the boat handled beautifully, and I felt a sense of freedom I hadn't experienced in years. Every evening at sunset, I'd call Dorothy on the satellite phone. She'd tell me about her day at the salon, ask about my adventures, and we'd talk for 20 or 30 minutes before saying goodnight. But even from the beginning, something felt off about those conversations. Dorothy's responses seemed rehearsed, like she was reading from a script. When I'd ask specific questions about her day, she'd give vague answers. When I'd tell her I missed her, she'd say, "I miss you too," but without any real emotion behind it. "How's the salon doing?" I'd ask. "Oh, busy as always. Same old drama with the staff." "Anything interesting happen today?" "Not really. Just the usual customers, usual gossip." By the second week, I started noticing that Jason's name came up a lot in our conversations. He was helping her with groceries. He'd fixed a leaky faucet in the kitchen. He'd stopped by to check on her because he was worried she was working too hard. "That's nice of him to look out for you," I'd say, trying to push down the uncomfortable feeling growing in my stomach. "Yes, he's such a good friend. To both of us." During the third week, something happened that should have been my wake-up call. I was anchored off Cape Hatteras, and I called Dorothy earlier than usual, around 8 p.m. instead of my usual 9 p.m. She didn't answer the first time, which was unusual. When she finally picked up on my third try, she sounded breathless. "Sorry, honey, I was in the shower," she said, but I could hear music and what sounded like conversation in the background. "Are you watching TV?" I asked. "Yes, just some show." "How was your day?" But as we talked, I distinctly heard a man's laugh in the background, a laugh I recognized. It was Jason's laugh, the distinctive chuckle he made when he found something genuinely funny. "Is someone there with you?" I asked. There was a pause, just a heartbeat too long. "No, of course not. It's just the TV. This comedy show is really funny." But I knew that laugh. It wasn't coming from a TV. "What show are you watching?" Another pause. "Oh, I don't remember the name. Some sitcom." After we hung up, I sat in my boat's cockpit for hours, staring at the stars and trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. But the seed of doubt had been planted. The next night, I called at a different time, 10 p.m. instead of 9. Dorothy took a long time to answer, and when she did, she sounded wide awake despite claiming she'd been asleep. "Sorry, I dozed off on the couch," she said, but her voice had none of the grogginess of someone who'd just woken up. "How was your day?" I asked. "Tiring. Long day at the salon. I came home and just crashed." But something in her tone suggested she wasn't alone. There was a carefulness to her words, as if she was choosing them for more than one audience. The rest of that week, our conversations became increasingly stilted. Dorothy seemed distracted, eager to get off the phone. When I tried to extend our talks, she'd mention being tired or having an early day tomorrow. "I miss you so much," I'd say, hoping to recapture some of the intimacy we used to share. "I miss you too, honey. Only one more week, right?" But it didn't sound like she missed me at all. If anything, she sounded like she was counting down the days until, what? Until I came home? Or until something else? A week before my scheduled return, I decided to surprise Dorothy by coming home 2 days early. I didn't tell her. I wanted to see the joy on her face when I walked through the door unexpectedly. June 14th, around 7 p.m., I tied up at the marina and drove home through the familiar streets of our neighborhood. Everything looked exactly the same palm trees, same houses, same suburban tranquility. But I felt different, changed by my month at sea, and suspicious in a way that made my stomach churn. As I turned onto our street, I saw Jason's silver BMW in our driveway. That wasn't unusual, he often stopped by, but something about seeing it there when Dorothy thought I was still at sea made my heart start racing. I parked a few houses down and walked quietly to our house. The living room curtains were partially open and I could see inside. What I saw made my blood turn to ice. Dorothy and Jason were sitting on our couch, where Dorothy and I watched movies and made plans for our future. But they weren't just sitting there as friends. Dorothy was curled up against Jason's side, her head on his shoulder, his arm wrapped around her. They were sharing a bottle of wine, and on the coffee table were 2 plates with the remnants of what looked like a romantic dinner. They were talking quietly, intimately like lovers do. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see their body language, the way Dorothy played with Jason's hand, the way he kissed the top of her head, the way they looked at each other. I stood in my own front yard, watching my wife of 5 years and my best friend since high school acting like a couple in love. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, it was how natural they looked together, how comfortable, how right it seemed to them. I watched for maybe 10 minutes, long enough to see Jason get up and go to the kitchen, long enough to see Dorothy follow him and wrap her arms around him from behind while he rinsed their wine glasses. Long enough to see them kiss, not a peck between friends but a real kiss, passionate and familiar. My hands were shaking as I walked back to my car. I sat there for another hour trying to process what I'd seen, trying to figure out what to do. Part of me wanted to storm in there and confront them. Part of me wanted to drive away and pretend I'd never seen anything. But mostly I just felt numb. Around 9 p.m. Jason came out of the house. Dorothy walked him to the door and they stood on the porch for several minutes talking and kissing goodbye. After his car disappeared down the street, Dorothy went back inside. I waited another 30 minutes, then called her cell phone. "Hi, honey," she answered, and her voice sounded so normal, so cheerful, that it made me sick. "How are you? How was sailing today?" "Good," I managed to say. "Just anchored for the night." "What are you up to?" "Oh, just relaxing at home. Watching some TV, having a quiet evening." "Lies. All lies. Jason didn't stop by today?" I asked, testing her. "No, why would he? I haven't seen him in a few days." More lies. I could practically taste them through the phone. "Just wondering. I thought maybe he'd check on you." "Nope, just me and the TV tonight. God, I miss you, Max. I can't wait for you to come home." The casual way she lied to me, the ease with which she pretended to miss me while I just watched her in another man's arms, was almost worse than the cheating itself. After we hung up, I drove to a motel near the airport and checked in for 2 nights. I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out how to handle this situation. Sleep didn't come easily. I kept replaying what I'd seen, kept thinking about how long this had been going on, kept wondering if I'd been the biggest fool in Florida. The next morning, I called in sick to work, the first sick day I'd taken in 2 years. Instead of going to the shop, I drove around aimlessly, thinking. I parked at different spots near our house throughout the day, watching. Jason's car appeared in our driveway around 11 a.m. He didn't leave until 4 p.m. 7 hours. My wife was spending 7 hours alone with my best friend while I was supposedly at sea. That evening, I called Dorothy at our usual time. "Hi, sweetheart. How was your day?" "Good. Caught some fish, read a book." "How about you?" "Busy day at the salon." "I'm exhausted. Just got home and I'm thinking about going to bed early." Another lie. I'd seen Jason's car in our driveway until late afternoon. "You didn't do anything else today?" "No, just work. You know how it is." I wanted to scream at her, to tell her I knew exactly how it was, that I'd seen Jason's car, that I knew she was lying. But instead, I just said goodnight and hung up. The second day of my early return, I decided I needed evidence. Not because I doubted what I'd seen, but because I needed something concrete for the divorce proceedings I was already mentally preparing for. I spent the morning at an electronics store buying a small digital camera with a powerful zoom lens. Then I positioned myself across the street from our house, hidden behind a neighbor's large oak tree. Jason arrived at 10:30 a.m. He didn't just walk up to the front door like a normal friend would. Instead, he looked around carefully as if making sure no one was watching, before using what was obviously a key to let himself into my house. My house. My home. The place where Dorothy and I had planned to raise children. They were so comfortable with their affair that she'd given him a key. I took pictures of him entering, noting the time. Then I waited. Around noon they came outside together and sat on our back patio. I could see them through the fence, Dorothy in a summer dress that I'd bought her for her birthday last year, Jason in casual clothes. They were having lunch together, talking and laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. I took more pictures. At one point, Dorothy got up and sat on Jason's lap. He wrapped his arms around her waist and she leaned down to kiss him. It was the kind of kiss Dorothy used to give me, back when we were first dating and couldn't keep our hands off each other. More pictures. They went back inside around 2 p.m. Jason's car didn't leave our driveway until 5 p.m. 7 hours. Again. That evening, Dorothy called me at the usual time, full of chatter about her supposedly busy day at the salon. She told me about difficult customers, staffing issues, inventory problems. She was so convincing, so detailed in her lies, that I almost wondered if I was going crazy. "I miss you so much, honey," she said at the end of our call. "I'm counting down the hours until you come home." "Me too," I lied right back. But I wasn't counting down the hours until I came home. I was counting down the hours until I could confront her with the truth and end this charade of a marriage. June 16th, my official return date. I made sure to arrive at the marina at exactly the time I told Dorothy I would, called her to let her know I was back, and drove home. She was waiting on the front porch when I pulled into the driveway, wearing a sundress and a smile that looked genuine. For a moment, seeing her there, I almost wondered if I'd imagined everything. "Welcome home," she called out, running down the steps to hug me. Her embrace felt different, or maybe I felt different. She smelled like perfume I didn't recognize, and when she kissed me, I couldn't help but wonder if those lips had been on Jason's just hours before. "How was your trip?" she asked, linking her arm through mine as we walked toward the house. "Incredible," I said. Lots of time to think. If she caught the double meaning in that statement, she didn't show it. Inside, the house looked exactly as it always had, but I found myself seeing it differently. The couch where I'd watched Dorothy and Jason together. The kitchen where I'd seen them kiss. The bedroom upstairs where... I couldn't let myself think about that yet. Jason arrived an hour later, right on schedule. He gave me a big hug and a hearty slap on the back. "Welcome back, sailor. How was the adventure?" "Life-changing," I said, looking directly into his eyes. Again, if he caught my meaning, he didn't show it. The three of us sat in the living room and they asked me all about my trip. I told them about the dolphins I'd seen, the storms I'd weathered, the sunsets that had taken my breath away. They listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions, laughing at my stories. But underneath the normal conversation, I was studying them. The way Dorothy's eyes lingered on Jason when she thought I wasn't looking. The way Jason's hand briefly touched her shoulder when he got up to get another beer. The way they seemed to communicate with subtle glances and half-smiles. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? After Jason left that night, Dorothy and I went to bed together for the first time in a month. She curled up against me the way she always had, but I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was thinking about him. The next few days were torture. I tried to act normal, tried to fall back into our usual routines, but everything felt fake. Dorothy went to work, came home, cooked dinner, watched TV with me. But I kept catching her texting someone and quickly putting her phone away when I entered the room. I kept noticing that she was doing laundry more often than usual, washing sheets, washing clothes, as if she was trying to erase evidence of something. Jason called a few times, suggesting we all get together for dinner or go see a movie. Each time, Dorothy would light up with an enthusiasm she rarely showed for my suggestions anymore. A week after my return, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to confront them, but I wanted to do it in a way that would make denial impossible. I told Dorothy I was going to run some errands on Saturday morning, pick up some parts for the boat, maybe grab lunch with some guys from work. Instead, I parked at the end of our street and waited. Jason's car appeared at 10 a.m. He used his key to enter through the back door. At 11 a.m., I called Dorothy's cell phone. "Hi, honey," she answered, sounding slightly out of breath. "Hey, I'm going to be longer than I thought. These guys want to grab lunch and maybe catch a baseball game. You okay with me being gone most of the day?" "Of course. Take your time. I'm just doing some cleaning around the house." "Love you," I said, testing her. "Love you too," she replied, but it sounded automatic, distracted. After I hung up, I waited another hour, then drove home. I used my key to enter through the front door, making as much noise as possible. I dropped my keys loudly on the hall table and called out, "Dorothy, I'm home." The sounds I heard from upstairs, scrambling, hushed voices, a door closing, told me everything I needed to know. Dorothy appeared at the top of the stairs a few minutes later, wearing a bathrobe and looking flustered. "You're back early," she said, trying to sound pleased but failing. "Yeah, the guys canceled." I started walking up the stairs. "Where's Jason's car?" She went pale. "What do you mean?" "His silver BMW. It's parked in the Hendersons' driveway next door. Seems like an odd place for him to park if he's not here." Dorothy's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. We were. Jason appeared behind her, fully dressed but disheveled, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Max," he started, "I can explain." "Can you?" I said calmly. "I'd love to hear this explanation." We all went downstairs and sat in the living room, the same room where I'd watched them together through the window 2 weeks ago. Dorothy was crying silently. Jason looked like he was going to be sick. "How long?" I asked. They looked at each other, and in that look I saw the truth of their relationship. This wasn't just a fling or a moment of weakness. This was love. They were in love with each other. 3 months, Dorothy whispered. 3 months. While I was working late trying to save money for our future, they were falling in love. While I was restoring my boat, dreaming of adventures Dorothy and I might share someday, she was sharing herself with my best friend. Why? Was all I could manage to ask. Dorothy looked at Jason and he nodded encouragingly. It wasn't supposed to happen, she began. You were working so much and I was at the salon all the time and we barely saw each other. Jason would stop by sometimes when you were at work and we'd talk. About what? Everything. Life, dreams, feelings. He listened to me. Max really listened. It was like a knife in my heart. Had I stopped listening to my wife? When had we stopped really talking? And you? I looked at Jason. He met my eyes for the first time since I'd caught them. She was lonely, Max. You were always working on cars or working on the boat. When was the last time you two went on a real date? When was the last time you surprised her with flowers or took her somewhere special? His words stung because they contained a grain of truth. I had been working a lot. I had been focused on practical things, saving money, fixing things, preparing for the future. But when had I stopped focusing on the present? When had I stopped focusing on Dorothy? So this is my fault? I asked. No, Dorothy said quickly. No, it's not your fault. It's mine. I should have talked to you about how I was feeling instead of this. When did it start? I needed to know the details even though they were killing me. Dorothy looked at Jason again and he took over the story. Remember when you went to that auto show in Orlando back in February? Dorothy was having problems with some suppliers at the salon, and she called me for advice. We met for coffee to talk about it. I remembered that weekend. Dorothy had seemed stressed about work, and I'd been excited about seeing the latest car models. I'd encouraged her to handle the situation while I was gone. We talked for hours, Dorothy continued. About work, about life, about marriage. It felt so good to really connect with someone again. And then? We started meeting for coffee regularly, Jason said. Just as friends at first. But you fell in love, I finished for him. Yes, Dorothy whispered. I fell in love. The simple honesty of it was devastating. She wasn't making excuses or trying to minimize what had happened. She had fallen in love with another man while married to me. What about the trip to Key West? I asked, remembering the hotel postcard I'd found. Dorothy looked surprised. How did you? I found the postcard. From the hotel. Dorothy and Jay with love. They exchanged glances again. We needed to figure out what this was, Jason said. Whether it was just an affair or something more serious. And what did you decide? We decided we wanted to be together, Dorothy said softly. Really together. Not sneaking around, not lying. We were going to tell you when you got back from sailing. Were you? I couldn't keep the skepticism out of my voice. Yes, she said firmly. This week, actually. We've been trying to figure out how to tell you without destroying everyone's life. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Well, mission accomplished. Everyone's life is pretty much destroyed now. We talked for another 2 hours. They told me about their relationship, about their feelings, about their plans. They had been planning to tell me the truth and ask for a divorce. They wanted to be together openly, honestly. In a twisted way, I almost respected them for that. They could have continued the affair indefinitely, kept me in the dark while they enjoyed the best of both worlds. Instead, they had decided to face the consequences of their choices. But that didn't make it hurt any less. I need you both to leave, I finally said. Dorothy, pack whatever you need for a few days and go stay somewhere else. We'll figure out the logistics later. Max, she started. Please. Just go. They left together, of course. I watched from the window as Jason loaded Dorothy's suitcases into his BMW. She turned to look back at the house, our house, one last time before getting in his car. Then I was alone in the house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. I called in sick to work for the rest of the week. I couldn't face going to the shop, couldn't face the normal routine of fixing other people's problems when my own life was falling apart. Instead, I spent my time thinking and planning. I called a divorce attorney and made an appointment. I went through our financial records, figuring out how to divide 5 years of shared assets. I started the practical process of untangling a life. Dorothy called several times, but I wasn't ready to talk to her yet. Jason called once. I didn't answer. The following Saturday, Dorothy came by while I was working on the boat. She looked different, not better or worse, just different. Lighter, maybe like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Can we talk? She asked. We sat on the dock looking out at the water. I'm sorry, Max. I'm so sorry for hurting you, for lying to you, for doing this the wrong way. But not sorry for falling in love with Jason, I said. She was quiet for a moment. No, I'm not sorry for that. I can't be sorry for finding happiness, even if it came at such a terrible cost. Her honesty was brutal but somehow appreciated. Do you love him? I asked. Yes. More than you ever loved me? She considered the question seriously. Differently than I loved you. You and I, we built something stable and comfortable. Jason and I, it's passionate and exciting and scary. And that's what you want? Passion over stability? I want both. I think Jason and I can have both. I nodded, accepting her answer even if I didn't like it. The divorce attorney says we can keep this simple if we both agree to be reasonable, I said. I don't want to take anything that isn't fair, Dorothy said. This isn't your fault, Max. You're a good man. You deserve better than what I did to you. Yeah, well, we don't always get what we deserve. We worked out the details over the next few weeks. Dorothy moved in with Jason temporarily while looking for her own place. We sold the house and split the proceeds. She took her car, her business, and her personal belongings. I kept the boat, my tools, and my truck. The hardest part wasn't the legal stuff, it was running into people who knew us as a couple. Neighbors who asked how Dorothy was doing. Colleagues who wanted to know why I seemed so distracted at work. Our married friends who had to choose sides or navigate the awkwardness of staying friends with both of us. Some people were supportive. Others were judgmental. A few seemed to take pleasure in the drama of it all. My sister Rachel flew down from Atlanta when she heard what had happened. I never liked her, she lied, trying to make me feel better. Yes, you did. Everyone liked Dorothy. That's what made this so hard to see coming. What are you going to do now? She asked. I don't know. Start over, I guess. You're still young, Max. You'll find someone else. Maybe. Right now I can't imagine trusting anyone enough to try. The divorce was finalized in October, 6 months after I returned from my sailing trip. Dorothy and Jason were there, sitting together on the other side of the courtroom. When the judge declared our marriage officially ended, Dorothy looked at me with tears in her eyes. I didn't feel angry anymore, just sad for what we'd lost and what we'd never had. Afterward, in the courthouse parking lot, Jason approached me. Max, I want you to know. He started. Don't, I cut him off. There's nothing you can say that will make this better. You got what you wanted. Just, be good to her, okay? Don't make all of this be for nothing. He nodded and walked away. Dorothy lingered by her car, as if waiting for me to say something. Finally I walked over. Are you happy? I asked. I'm trying to be. Are you okay? I'm trying to be too. Max, I hope someday you can forgive me. Not for my sake but for yours. Carrying anger around will only hurt you. I'm working on it, I said honestly. That was the last real conversation we had. I quit my job at the auto shop in November and bought a small marina in the Florida Keys with my share of the house money. It came with a tiny apartment above the office and a repair shop for boats instead of cars. Different tools, same skills. The first year was hard. I was lonely, grieving not just the end of my marriage but the loss of my best friend and the life I'd thought I was building. Some nights I'd sit on my boat, anchored in the moonlight, and wonder if I'd made a mistake. Maybe I should have fought for Dorothy. Maybe I should have tried harder to win her back. But deep down I knew the truth. You can't fight for someone who doesn't want to be fought for. You can't win back someone who was never really yours to begin with. Slowly I began to rebuild. The marina business grew as word spread about my fair prices and quality work. I made new friends among the other boat owners and the locals. I started dating again, cautiously at first, then with more confidence as I learned to trust my judgment again. 2 years after the divorce, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Dorothy and Jason had gotten married. They had a small ceremony on the beach in Key Largo, ironically not far from my new home. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just a kind of peaceful closure. 3 years after the divorce, I met Sarah, a marine biologist who was studying coral reefs in the Keys. She was nothing like Dorothy, brunette instead of blonde, practical instead of glamorous, more interested in saving the ocean than in saving money. We bonded over our shared love of the sea and our mutual understanding that sometimes life takes you in directions you never expected. Sarah had been through her own divorce, her own betrayal, her own process of rebuilding. We understood each other's scars without having to explain them. When we finally decided to move in together, it was based on genuine compatibility and hard-won wisdom rather than just passion and hope. I still think about Dorothy sometimes. I hope she and Jason found the happiness they were looking for. I hope their passionate love proved strong enough to build a lasting life together. I don't wish them ill, but I don't wish I was back there either. The sea taught me something important during that month-long sailing trip that changed everything. Sometimes the storm that threatens to sink you actually carries you toward a better destination. Sometimes losing your way is the only way to find where you really belong. I never did take another month-long solo sailing trip. But I've taken countless day trips and weekend adventures with Sarah, who turned out to be an excellent sailor herself. We've explored hidden coves and remote anchorages throughout the Caribbean, building new memories to replace the old ones. Sometimes, when we're anchored in some pristine bay watching the sunset, Sarah will ask me about my first marriage. I tell her the truth, that I learned more about love by losing it than I ever did by thinking I had it. That betrayal, as much as it hurt, taught me the difference between settling for someone and truly choosing them every day. "Do you regret marrying Dorothy?" she asked me once. "No," I answered honestly. "If I hadn't married her, I wouldn't have learned what I really needed in a partner. I wouldn't have developed the strength to start over. And I wouldn't have ended up here with you." 5 years after my divorce, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Dorothy, written on elegant stationery that I recognized from her salon days. "Dear Max," it began. "I hope this letter finds you well and happy. I've been thinking about writing to you for months and I finally found the courage. I want you to know that Jason and I divorced 6 months ago. I suppose you might take some satisfaction in knowing that our relationship, built on deception and passion, couldn't survive the reality of daily life together. The excitement that drew us together faded when we had to deal with mortgages and household chores and all the ordinary challenges of marriage. But I'm not writing to tell you about our failures. I'm writing to thank you for how you handled our divorce. You could have made things ugly and vengeful, but you didn't. You let me go with dignity, and I've never forgotten that kindness. I've spent a lot of time in therapy trying to understand why I made the choices I did. I think I was scared of becoming complacent, of settling into a comfortable but passionless life. I mistook stability for stagnation and familiarity for boredom. I threw away something real for something that felt more exciting. I heard you remarried. I hope she appreciates what a good man you are. I hope you found the happiness that I was too foolish to recognize when I had it. I don't expect a response to this letter. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I hope you can forgive me, not for my sake, but so you can be completely free to love again. With regret and respect, Dorothy." I showed the letter to Sarah that evening as we sat on the deck of our boat, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars come out. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. "Sad for her," I said. "But not sorry for me. If she hadn't left, I never would have found you. Do you think you'll write back?" I considered it. "Maybe. Someday. When enough time has passed that it won't matter anymore." But I never did write back. Some chapters of your life are meant to stay closed, and some forgiveness is better given from a distance. Last month, 6 years after my divorce, Sarah and I got engaged. I proposed to her at sunset while we were anchored off a small island in the Bahamas, not far from where I first suspected something was wrong in my first marriage. But this time, the setting held only beauty and promise, no shadows of betrayal. As I write this story, I can see Sarah through the window of our marina office, working on her laptop, planning our honeymoon sailing trip to the Virgin Islands. She looks up and catches me watching her, smiles that brilliant smile that first caught my attention, and goes back to her work. I learned something important from my first marriage and its painful end. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice you make every day. Dorothy chose excitement over commitment. Jason chose passion over loyalty. I chose to learn from their choices instead of being destroyed by them. The ocean is vast and unpredictable, full of storms and calms, dangerous currents and safe harbors. Marriage is the same way. The difference is in finding someone who wants to navigate those waters with you, not someone who's looking for an escape route when the weather gets rough. I forgave Dorothy and Jason long ago, not because they deserved it, but because carrying anger was like carrying anchor chain. It just weighed me down and kept me from moving forward. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing what they did. It meant choosing to let their actions be their burden, not mine. Sometimes people ask me if I wish I could go back and do things differently, pay more attention to Dorothy, work less, be more romantic, fight harder for our marriage. The answer is no. Not because I don't have regrets, but because going back would mean giving up everything I have now. My month at sea taught me to trust my instincts, to pay attention to the signs that something isn't right, and to have the courage to face hard truths. But more than that, it taught me that sometimes you have to lose your bearings completely before you can find your true heading. Dorothy was right about one thing in her letter: I did find happiness. But it wasn't the happiness I thought I wanted when I was 25 and getting married for the first time. This happiness is deeper, earned through loss and built on a foundation of self-knowledge and hard-won wisdom. The marina has become more than just a business, it's become a community. Boat owners stop by not just for repairs but for conversation. Fellow sailors share stories of their adventures and misadventures. Young couples ask for advice about buying their first boat, and I find myself telling them the same thing the sea taught me: respect the water, trust your instruments, and never sail with someone who won't help you weather the storms. Next week, Sarah and I will set sail for our honeymoon. We'll be gone for 3 weeks, exploring islands and reefs, diving in crystal clear water, sleeping under stars that have guided sailors for centuries. But unlike my solo voyage 6 years ago, I won't be running from anything or toward anything. I'll just be enjoying the journey with someone I chose and who chose me back, every single day. As for Dorothy and Jason, I honestly hope they both found what they were looking for, even if they couldn't find it together. Life is too short to waste wishing unhappiness on people who were once important to you, even if they hurt you badly. The last time I saw Jason was 2 years ago at a boat show in Miami. He was alone, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. We nodded to each other across the crowd but didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Some friendships, once broken, can never be repaired, and that's okay. Some losses are meant to stay lost. I kept my sailboat, the one I restored so carefully all those years ago. I renamed her Second Chance, and she's still seaworthy, still ready for adventure. Sometimes I take her out alone, just to remember where I came from and how far I've traveled, not just in miles, but in understanding myself and what I really need to be happy. The sea is eternal, indifferent to human drama, constant in its changeability. It doesn't care about your broken heart or your shattered dreams. It doesn't judge your mistakes or celebrate your victories. It just is vast and honest and real. There's something comforting about that constancy, something healing about being small beneath an infinite sky. I learned to sail when I was 12, taught by my grandfather who'd been in the Navy. He told me that the sea would teach me everything I needed to know about life if I paid attention. He was right. It taught me patience, respect, humility, and the importance of preparation. Most importantly, it taught me that you can't control the wind, but you can adjust your sails. My first marriage was built in calm waters. When the storms came, we didn't know how to adjust our sails together. Dorothy chose to abandon ship, and Jason chose to help her do it. I chose to learn how to sail solo until I found someone who wanted to share the helm. That's the story of how I discovered my wife's betrayal and how I chose to move forward from it. It's not a story of revenge or dramatic confrontations. It's a story of quiet resilience, of learning to forgive without forgetting, and of understanding that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can lead to the best thing that happens to you. The sun is setting now over the marina. Sarah has finished her work and is walking down the dock toward our boat. Tomorrow we'll set sail for the Bahamas to scout locations for our honeymoon. In 2 months, we'll be married on the beach here in the Keys, surrounded by friends who've become family and family who've become friends. Life has a way of surprising you. 6 years ago I thought my story was ending. Instead, it was just beginning. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Maybe YouTube will no longer offer you my channel, so subscribe to it by clicking subscribe on the right under the video to receive new interesting stories. Also on the right of the video there is a playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to, and you can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.